Businesses are relooking their strategic focus to expand their operations. They are also considering areas in which to grow and explore new markets to find spaces to reinvent themselves. And the African market has many opportunities that these companies can tap into and establish business deals that may contribute to gross domestic product growth and create jobs. Xolile Sizani is Group CEO of Servest, and he joins us in the studio to explore this subject. Thank you very much for coming to our studio.
Thank you very much, Colin, for your
right. Firstly, what kind of opportunities are available on the African market, and this with the context of a South African company that is looking at expanding?
Yeah, and I think the first important aspect is the understanding of the size of the African market. Research shows that the market is about $2.6 trillion US, of about $2.1 trillion of that is consumption. In other words, it's growth that comes through the expenditure in the main. 1.1 billion Africans expected to grow to about 2.1 billion by 2040. But what is also happening, and which we are seeing in the African market, is a move by many of the Africans from peri-urban areas and from rural areas into metropolitan and urban cities. What that does is that it creates, and you'll see a lot of that happening, where there's a lot of development within the major cities. And the development is in the infrastructure, which allows many facilities management companies to have an opportunity in a space to be able to play. So the growth in the African continent, mainly with the move of many of Africans into the metropolitans, is allowing that growth. And that's where many companies have the opportunity, because you've got infrastructure, you've got a lot of malls that are being built, you've got office parks that are being built, you have smart cities. If you go to Ghana, for example, Kenya, a country like Nigeria, there's quite a lot of that, which are opportunities for facilities management companies in the main to play. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that are coming up in the African continent. And again, like you've just reflected now, our own economy in South Africa is becoming difficult to operate in, and therefore companies have to look at opportunities in Africa, and Servest is one of the companies actually doing some of that.
So when you look at companies that have tried to do business in Africa and managed to succeed, and others did not and had to retract and go back home, you're talking the likes of Tiger Brands, which had to change their strategy and come back home, but they've actually gone back to Nigeria. But you have MTN as well. So when you're looking at these companies, are we not looking at perhaps a company that is just a copying and pasting the model and applying it in another country, which is something like there wouldn't be any cascading effect in terms of development on the South African platform, and the jobs that are created won't be created in South Africa. It will be just a company operating beyond the borders.
And I think what is important as part of any company's intention to move into the continent and into the countries outside the borders of South Africa is really an appreciation and understanding of the macroeconomic dynamics within those countries, finding strategic partners, for example, understanding the policy framework within those countries. Recently we've been doing some work around Botswana, where you find that government is actually introducing localization. There are certain level of opportunities within the country where they are going to be designated for local companies. Countries like Nigeria, you're faced with issues of repatriation of your cash. And so these are dynamics that one needs to be averse with as they look at opportunities within the continent.
So what are the gaps and the misconceptions of doing business in Africa? Because again, we cannot sweep under the carpet issues of security. When you look at terrorism in Kenya, for example, where you wouldn't know when a bomb is going to explode, where people will be taken hostage by terrorists.
Yeah. And again, I think the tendency at times is to try and paint Africa as the same. For example, in America, there are similar threats that you are referring to, but business still looks at America as an opportunity in the area to grow. You take Rwanda, for example, a young country. If you take into effect what happened in 1994, the level at which they have advanced in terms of accepting technology, the developments that are happening in that country are developments that are creating new opportunities for them to move into the digital age. If you look at Ghana, there's an expansion in their infrastructure, the airports, they're building smart cities. So all of these things are creating new opportunities for African companies based in South Africa to explore. And I think those are some of the things that need to be considered when we look at the gaps in those markets.
And then another gap is the issue of companies that have not moved with the times regarding updating technology and innovation. You find that some of the operations are still medieval, so to say.
Yeah. And I think that's normally the challenge, but you have to appreciate that the level of advancement in companies, for example, that are in South Africa and companies that are operating, for example, in Kenya, there will always be that difference. But an understanding of the market, an understanding of what the potential benefit and the value that the clients and the customers want is also something that is pushes the demand for new advanced and technologies. As I mentioned, Rwanda has already embraced technology in the logistics space. They are talking about smart cities. So a lot of those developments that we are seeing in South Africa are beginning to take shape and to be exploited and to be used in those countries as well.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Hoping that we will dispel the myths that Africa is not open for business, as other people think that, this is the dark continent.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Xolile Sizani is a Group CEO of Servest, speaking to us about exploring business opportunities on the African continent.